Good morning. Good morning once again. This time around.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Or maybe we should get an additional cup of coffee. Good morning, esteemed mayors, colleagues, guests, and participants of the 5th African School on Decentralization. My name is Tinashe Chikwata. I work for the Dala-Oma Institute, which is based at the Faculty of Law at the University of the Western Cape. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this school, running under the theme Decentralization and Finances. To get us started, let me kindly request that we take a minute of silence for a prayer or meditation before we begin today's proceedings. Thank you very much. Let me begin by observing all protocols and once again to reiterate my great pleasure to welcome you to this 5th school on the African School on Decentralization. Over the next 2 weeks, we will engage and discuss and interrogate various themes and topics linked to the theme of decentralization and finances. Just by way of logistics and administration, all of you will quite be aware that Ms. Laura Whelan has been at the center of almost everything. So if you have any other logistical issues to discuss, she's our contact person. So anything else relating to logistics, she's our contact person. Let me acknowledge the presence of our TVC, the presence of our Dean, and the presence of the Director of the Dala-Oma Institute. I'll introduce them later as they are going to speak in this welcoming session. Secondly, let me also acknowledge the funding without which this school would not have been possible. First of all, we acknowledge the support of the university. We acknowledge the support of the National Research Foundation. We acknowledge the support of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. We also acknowledge the support of the Local Public Sector Alliance. In this welcoming and opening session, we have 5 speakers that are going to give brief welcoming remarks. And to help us get started is Professor Yap Tifisa, who is the current SACHE chair in Motlego government based at the Dala-Oma Institute. Can you give him a round of applause?
Thank you very much, Prof. Chikwata. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to be here this morning and greet you all. Also from my side, all protocol must be observed. We always start off a little bit formal with the ASD with a grand opening session, so we do it in style. So, Professor Khala, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape, warm welcome. Professor Jacques de Wild, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Professor Lucas Bunting, Director of Dala-Oma Institute, Dr. Amdewok, Dean from the College of Social Sciences, who will join us online later from Addis Ababa University with a pre-recorded message. Also in absence, warmly welcomed Professor Henk Kummeling, distinguished professor from Utrecht University, Professor Ayele from Addis Ababa University, the Center for Federal and Governance Studies. Warm welcome. I also want to acknowledge Councillor Kanumwe Chota from Zambia, Councillor Jeffrey Nyamana from Mutare, and Councillor Kola Pakati from Buffalo City, who I don't see here yet, but who will join us later today. And then all lecturers who will be introduced to you as we proceed. And of course, most importantly, all of you, participants to the African School for Decentralization, the 5th edition. Warm welcome to all of you. Wonderful to see you here. You've traveled from all over the continent. In fact, some of you are still making your way in with flights delayed, etc. Traveling in Africa is never without challenges. So it's wonderful to welcome you here in this venue for the 5th edition of the African School on Decentralization. And it indeed fills me with immense pride that the Dalla Omar Institute, together with the Center for Federalism and Governance Studies from Addis Ababa University, can welcome you to this prestigious African School on Decentralization. We're celebrating our anniversary. We started off this initiative in 2021. We held our first edition online. It was during the pandemic. The second one was in Cape Town in 2022. The third one was in Addis Ababa in 2023. Last year we were here in Cape Town for the 4th edition, and this year I guess it's our first anniversary, the 5th edition of the African School on Decentralization, which really is the only one of its kind in Africa. It's convened by 2 African universities. It's populated, taught by lecturers who are mostly from Africa, populated by participants from all over Africa. It's truly a case of a successful South-South collaboration. Supported by South African and global partners, already mentioned by Prof. Chigwata, South Africa's National Research Foundation, the Local Public Sector Alliance, and the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. So finally, the time is here. It has taken months of preparation and anticipation, and we can now finally start the school. Close to 140 people applied, only 24 were selected. That means only 1 in 6 was accepted. So it's truly a prestigious event, not easy to get into, and we really expect a lot from our participants, and we select carefully those that we think would benefit most from this school. So what is our objective for the next 2 weeks? We, as the lecturing staff of the ASD, we are going to teach you. We brought together an A-team of teachers and eminent practitioners. Most of them hail from Africa, and they are a diverse group of lecturers making up the ASD faculty. And they will not just teach, not just talk at you, but they will expect you to talk back and engage with your peers, and share in your experience and wisdom amongst each other. We also want to inspire you and spur you on, because we only have you here for 2 weeks, and it will go by very quickly. But after that, after the ASD closes, we want you to go into the continent and work towards improving the governance, development, and service delivery in Africa, and improve the lives of ordinary people. That's in the end why we do this. And we want you to do so as ambassadors of the ASD. Thirdly, we want to connect you. You are now part of the ASD Alumnus Network, linked to the Local Public Sector Alliance and an emerging Pan-African network of decentralization advocates. And as you know, networks are power, are influence, and it's very powerful to be connected to others who work in the same field, who do similar work, different parts of the continent, different sectors, and that network can really do a lot. And we want you to use that network to make good things happen, to lift up the African continent. It's taken many months of preparation. The ASD team has spent many hours in meetings planning for this. We discussed the content, the program, budget, funding, logistics, planning, visas, catering, hotels, etc., etc. We agonized over whom to select, carefully conceptualized the program, activated our networks to deliver an A-team of lecturers, and engaged our local partners to organize a site visit, etc., etc. So to the participants, welcome to the most beautiful city in the world. There's already a very active WhatsApp group where people are exchanging ideas and exchanging suggestions for tourism visits and activities, enjoying the city. So I'm now going to be the grumpy professor and saying, we're here to work, we're here to teach and to learn, but trust me, you will have ample opportunity to enjoy the beauty of the city of Cape Town and enjoy what it has to offer. So we all look forward to that. Very briefly, the fact that we are here, we owe it to the ASD team, and I really want to take a brief moment to acknowledge them all. They're a team of fantastic colleagues committed to ensure that you are well looked after, that you will learn, that you will be prodded to think, talk, engage, and be inspired. So please work with them, respect them, and follow their leads. They've done this before. You're not the first cohort of students that we guide through these 2 weeks. So I want to quickly acknowledge again Professor Zimlak Ayele from the Addis Ababa University, Dr. Henry Gichana, with whom you have engaged a lot already over the last couple of weeks. In there on my right, Prof. Dinesh Jigwata, you have been introduced to. Dr. Johandri Wright, she's not here right now, but she will no doubt meet her this afternoon and for the rest of the 2 weeks. Dr. Curtly Stevens, sitting there in the corner, postdoctoral fellow at the Institute, and we will also engage with him a lot over the next 2 weeks. Ms. Tabile Plonto Spambo, she's also there in the corner. She will engage with you, and you will see her over the next 2 weeks. Ms. Jenica Bierkes, who will join us later this week. Professor Nico Steitler, whom you will also meet later this week. Then we've got Ms. Kavilia Septo here in the corner. She's our communications coordinator. We've got Ms. Crystal Nitschke, she's sitting outside. Last but not least, and I'm glad she's standing there in the corner, so that we can give her a special round of applause, Ms. Laura Welland. She really is the brain and the machine behind all the operations that you are part of. So as Professor Chigwata already indicated, if there's any issue that you have with regard to logistics, you can ask me. I'll probably stare back at you and not say anything because I probably won't know what to do. So it's best you ask Laura. You have a better chance of your problem being sorted out. So please, she's there to help, and whatever we can do as a team to make your stay as comfortable as possible, we will be there for you. We'll soon be joined by the Executive Mayor of the City of Cape Town, so we're all looking forward to that, to listen to Alderman Geordin Hill-Lewis. So all in all, I can't wait for the ASD to formally open, and I'm very happy you're here, that you're safe, and that we can start this wonderful school. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yabtifisa, for those welcoming remarks. It's indeed an exciting program, and for the next 2 weeks, you will testify that indeed it is an exciting program. It is one of the programs that we offer as an institute based at the Faculty of Law at the University. University of the Western Cape, as a university, we're a proud university. We make impact in the society, and we have a record of successfully doing so. To welcome you from the University of the Western Cape, we have our Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Professor Halhala, who is going to give some opening remarks, and may we kindly give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Prof, and welcome once more. I want to so much, but special welcome to you. Thank you for joining us at UWC. Colleagues, good morning. I'm sure you can do better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, and my appreciation also goes to Prof. Defisa for setting the tone. I think, Prof, you've done my job already, so I don't know why I'm here, because you've already done the work. In any event, let me take the honors. Colleagues, I carry warm greetings from the Office of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Balfour, who could not join you this morning because of other university businesses. So, Prof. Balfour has asked me to wish you well, especially for a successful program this morning and the week ahead. So please, Dean, record that so that at least it's well known. And thanks for that. Now that we have that out of the way, in my capacity as the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, I wish to offer my warmest greetings to you and welcome you to our space. And it has already been explained that this is a program which is a collaborative relationship, between our colleagues in Addis Ababa. Of course, we are very proud that we are, in a way, involved in such a very important partnership. So, from the onset, I must also, extend a warm welcome to all of you, especially colleagues who come all the way from the African continent, who hail from that side. And I do understand that we may have colleagues who might be coming from other regions, across the globe. So special welcome to all of you. It's always important, I must repeat it, although Prof. Defisa has already done it, to give thanks to those who have worked so hard behind the scenes to see to it that this event is a great success. We tend to forget about them. But you see now the program is now in a state of readiness to take off the ground. It's because of those people who have done much more, behind the scenes. Special welcome to the Dean, Prof. Jack Deville, who's here with us this morning. Prof, thank you very much. You are recognized. And I also believe that we have your fellow Dean from Addis Ababa and Dr. Amdouak. So I think she's joining online, if I'm correct. So Dean, we also welcome you. Prof. Muti, this is your baby, and you're the leader in the Dalai Institute. So we must give thanks to you for your leadership in this project. I am told that the mayor will be joining us soon, so I do want to acknowledge him, Geordin Hill-Lewis, our executive mayor. I think this also sends a message that you are so special, you're so important. If the mayor could come to you, this is not common. I've never seen him, so because you're here, I'm going to see him. So take that as important as well. And I'm also pleased to welcome our special guest, Prof. Hank Kumelang, former rector from Utrecht University all the way. Prof, we welcome you. Prof also serves as extraordinary professor at UWC. We welcome you and we are grateful that you are here with us this morning. The African School on Decentralization is now in its 5th year, I have been advised, and it brings together a growing network of scholars and practitioners with a common goal, that is to strengthen democratic governance in the African continent. Our thematic areas, in fact, let me start with our theme for the year is titled Decentralisation and Finances, which I would imagine reminds us that decentralization works best when strong institutions go hand in hand with sound financial systems. From the beginning, our purpose as the institution has always been to make learning accessible to all those who seek it. The principles of access, equity, and transformation continue to enrich our identity as an institution, while at the same time providing guidance in terms of what we strive to achieve as a university. The same principles inform our academic project today. It is through the institutes such as the Dulauma, which is housed in the Faculty of Law, the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, which is housed in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, as well as the Center for Humanities Research, which is located in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, that UWC continue to make a meaningful contribution to policy debate as well as research, and the extent to which it connects with that kind of research that deals directly with real-world problems. Our engagement with decentralization supports our broader focus on strengthening democratic institutions and improving people's lives. I want to underscore that, as Prof highlighted earlier. Now, sound fiscal management at the local government level determines whether service reaches people, whether participation is genuine, as you might know, and whether government earns public interest. So earlier this year, for those of you, including the Dean, might remember, our institution hosted the Human Rights Defenders Summer School, which brought together activists and scholars from across the African continent with a view to engage on democracy and institutional trust. Many of those discussions resonate with your agenda, as I understand, as some of your thematic areas are dealing directly with issues of anti-corruption, for example. It also takes into account effective local institutions, and of course, fiscal management, to mention just a few. That same focus was echoed last week at the Conference on Land, Life and Society, hosted by the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. The African School on Decentralization continues to return to these conversations and debates, as you might pick up, and this shows how issues related to fiscal policy and institutional design can strengthen democratic practice, and how UWC's work advances governance and sustainability across Africa. As I draw to a close, it is important for us to pause for a moment and consider what makes the African School on Decentralization so special and distinctive. One of its strengths, I must emphasize, it is guided by a collaborative model. And of course, this is important for all of us. It is an African initiative, as you know, but at the same time, it is convened by African universities, taught largely by African scholars, but at the same time, it is grounded on the African context. I think these are important observations that we must take into account. Now, this approach for me is fundamental for two reasons. It builds capacity and gives due recognition the importance of local expertise. That's number one. And number two, it promotes knowledge generation as well as knowledge sharing across the African continent, which I think is equally important. Now, in that same spirit of collaboration, I would want to encourage you to see this program as an important opportunity that facilitates the building of networks that will last, but at the same time networks that are sustainable. So on behalf of the University of the Western Cape, I would like to give special thanks to the Dula Omar Institute. For those of you who might not know, I think Prof. Munti will confirm this. The constitution of this country was drafted at the Dula Omar Institute. Is that correct?
Broadly correct.
So we are special as the institution. I think you must also take note of that. So I'd like to give thanks to the Institute and its leadership, but at the same time give thanks to those who have been entrusted with the huge responsibility to facilitate the program, and those, as I've mentioned earlier, those who have worked behind the scenes to see to it that this is important. So I hope your time in Cape Town is rewarding, and of course your participation inspires stronger and of course more accountable governance across the continent. I wish you well. I wish you a productive and inspiring week ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Hala. Can we give him another round of applause? Your address, I think, touched upon a number of issues that are critical for this school. I just managed to highlight a few of them. The first one being the importance of sound finances, not just for the university, but also for institutions such as local government. And this is the theme that we're going to interrogate. The second issue is when you've got money, the next important issue is you must be able to account for the money. When you're unable to account for the money, the question then becomes, what are the mechanisms that are in place to follow through on the use of resources? And particular reference was made to the anti-corruption institutional framework. And then another critical point touched on the importance of democratic governance, looking at the role of the Dula Omar Institute and other centers and institutes at the University of the Western Cape, including PLUS, that undertake various roles. Then the last, I think, important point is one of the strongest features of the African School on Decentralization, the fact that it is unique. If you go on the internet right now, you type the word summer school, you are likely to see that 99% of what you're going to see are probably going to be from Europe or America or anywhere else. And the African School on Decentralization is one of the most unique, I think, school on the continent, probably one of its kind in as far as local government decentralization is concerned. So we are very proud as an institute, we are very proud as a university, we are very proud as a part of our collaboration with the Addis Ababa University to be offering this school, not just for once. This is the 5th time that we've been offering the African School on Decentralization. So thank you so much, Professor Hala, for those warm welcoming remarks. Reference was also made to the fact that the Dula Omar Institute is based at the law faculty at the University of the Western Cape. That's where we are based. We undertake more disciplinary research, but we are part of a broader faculty of the law faculty at the University of the Western Cape. So to give us some welcome remarks, again, is the Dean of the Law Faculty of the Western Cape, who is Professor Jacques Deville. Can we kindly ask that we give him a round of applause?
Thank you very much for that, Professor Tuwata, Professor Khala, Professor Minton, Professor Kuminen, the former Rector of Utrecht University, the ASD team, and those who will be students for this coming week, 2 weeks, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to say a few words at this opening of the African School on Decentralization. The theme, as you have it here on the background, of course, is on finances and decentralization. And looking at the program and what will be presented, it looks like the focus will be on the first place on where to fund local government and regional governments, of course, because without funding they cannot fulfill their mandates. And in the second place, then, on accountability, on monitoring, and the appropriate control and intervention mechanisms to prevent corruption, wastage, and capture of these spheres of government. This is, of course, a very important theme in South Africa, where we're heading towards local government elections within the next 12 or so months. And we know that corruption and capture is embedded in many spheres of government in South Africa. So it's a very important theme to address here, not only for South Africa, but also for the rest of the African continent. We already heard who the funders are. They are also here on the PowerPoint. And just from my side also, we are very grateful for the support from these partners of the school. The ASD is a fantastic initiative, as has been mentioned. I want to mention Henry Paul Kichana, who had a big role to play in the development of this program, also a number of other people, of course. But we are very, very proud of this program. It has been mentioned how unique it is. But from the law faculty's perspective, this is a very long-standing relationship that we've had also with Addis Ababa University. Professor Ayele is an alumnus and a long friend of the faculty, and we're very grateful and very proud of this partnership. We hope that this relationship will be further strengthened over years to come, and that there will be many more iterations of this school. So with those few words, I want to wish you all the best with the discussions this week, and we hope that we will all learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Jacques Deville. As an institute, this is the support that we rely upon to be able to offer such a school. We have support from the university. As you heard, we have tremendous support from our Dean and the Faculty of Law. So thank you so much, Dean, for being with us this morning. We're going to move on to Dr. Ezana Adwek, who is the Dean of the College of Social Science, Arts and Humanities from Addis Ababa University, to give us some welcome remarks. And that will be done with a pre-recorded message. If you could just give us a second to do that, that would be great.
To address Good day, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to address you on this important occasion of the African School of Decentralization. As Dean of the College of Social Sciences, Arts and Humanities at Addis Ababa University, I would like to begin by saying how delightful we are that the Center of Federalism and Governance Studies has recently joined our newly formed college. This is a very welcome development, one that expands our intellectual community and strengthens our capacity to engage with some of the most pressing governance questions facing our continent today. I have also learned about the long-standing collaboration between the Center and the Dala Omar Institute at the University of Western Cape. The fact that these two institutions are co-hosting the African School of Decentralization is in itself a powerful testament to that enduring partnership, built over many years of shared commitment to democratic governance, decentralization, and academic excellence. As the college's dean, I want to assure you that my office is fully committed to deepening and broadening this collaboration, both in teaching and research.
So in
We
the
see
interest
great
of
potential
time,
for
I'm just
joint
gonna
learning
move over
programs,
to
comparative studies, and scholarly
the
exchange
director of
that
the
will
Dela Oma
continue to
Institute
enrich
whilst they
our
are
institutions
fixing the
and,
IT issues.
more importantly, contribute to the advancement of knowledge
so
and practice
our
in
next
governance
speaker
across Africa.
to also welcome you
Let
from
me
the
take this
Institute side is
opportunity
Professor
to
Lucas
congratulate
Kuti,
all the
who is the director of the Dela Oma Institute and is my immediate boss. So I would appreciate it if you can clap very loud.
Tanash, I miss the praise singer that we have become so used to. Good morning to everyone. You should feel very welcome by now. Also, I acknowledge Professor Khalakhala, DBC academic, Prof. DeVille, Dr. Izana, and Professor Ayele, and also Prof. Kummeling, an old friend of the Institute and the faculty. We are honored to have you here. We're still waiting for the mayor. And then, of course, I must welcome our participants who will be with us for the next 2 weeks. Now, if you arrived in the last 24 hours in Cape Town, you may have been misled by the wind-still nature of the weather we had for the last 2 days here in Cape Town. Don't be lulled into comfort. The wind will blow. So this is the fifth African School on Decentralisation, and it's indeed a flagship event for the Institute and for the faculty, and both the DVC and Dean have confirmed this. I must also express my gratitude to the Center for Federalism and Governance Studies at Addis Ababa University for co-organizing and co-hosting this fifth ASD. We must also express our gratitude to our donors, being the National Research Foundation, the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, the Local Public Sector Alliance, and of course the University of the Western Cape that has supported the Institute over the years. The Institute has, as Tanash has already mentioned, a fairly unique focus on local government and multi-level governance. And this was largely developed under the leadership of Professor Statler, who will join us hopefully tomorrow, I think, and subsequently guided by Jaap de Visser, who took over the Saatchi chair from Prof. Statler. The establishment of the Saatchi chair in 2013 at the university was indeed recognition of the tremendous body of research that had already been completed by that stage, and it was reflective of the confidence placed in Prof. Statler and his team at the time. The chair provided the model for resources and the platform for resources to accelerate the research output, and the past 12 years have indeed been immensely productive, not only in peer-reviewed publications, but also in books, book chapters, and of course graduates, PhDs and master's students who graduated under the guidance of that team. So the theme for this fifth African School on Decentralisation is Decentralisation and Finances. Local governments often lack sufficient financial autonomy and administrative capacity to deliver basic services effectively. Revenue collection is limited by narrow tax bases, poor fiscal transfers, and weak financial management systems. Even when decentralisation policies exist on paper, national governments frequently fail to transfer adequate funds of decision-making authority. This leads to dependence on central grants, under-resourced municipalities, and difficulties in planning, budgeting, and implementing local development projects. In very recent months, we've seen protests developing in Kenya and more recently in Madagascar, where the youth are protesting about basic service conditions, and this has led to extensive arrests in both countries, a range of rights violations, and these are issues that we must be deeply concerned about, because they are about the basic conditions of living and the things that people need to develop their potential. The program for the school for the next 2 weeks sets an agenda emphasizing an interdisciplinary approach. It requires not only an approach focusing on what the law says, but the practical and real consequences that legislation has, or where just legislation fails to protect the rights of individuals and groups. So I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all who made this possible, especially the support staff. And I would like to wish you a thought-provoking 2 weeks ahead. The very last point is that I must use this opportunity to have the microphone and alert you to the fact that on the 21st of October, we will have the Dala Omar Memorial Lecture on the UWC campus. I think the program participants, as part of your attendance here, but especially for the people listening online, if you don't already have responded to an invitation, please contact me about receiving an invitation. This year the lecture will be given by Professor Statler, who is a legend in the field of local government and multi-level governance, so we're all looking very much forward to that lecture. So with that, thank you very much, and please feel very welcome to the University of the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lucas Muti, for giving those welcoming remarks from a DOI point of view. I think you touched upon the history of the Institute and focused on, in particular, on the history of the local government project, which, together with the SACHE chair, is responsible for offering the African School on Decentralization with our colleagues from Addis Ababa University. You also touched upon many challenges confronting local governments around finances, the state of public service delivery in many parts of our countries, and the fact that when we look at these challenges, the law is useful, but we also ought to make use of other methods, because interdisciplinary approaches offer the best perspective of analyzing problems and potentially recommending solutions to them. Then lastly, you made reference to our annual Dala Omar Memorial Lecture with Prof. Nico Stetler, who's going to be the main speaker next week. As you see from our program, the school and the memorial lecture are sort of like integrated this year, so we have an opportunity to attend the memorial lecture next week at the University of the Western Cape. Whilst we are still sorting out the recording, and I've just received some thumbs up that the recording is ready to play, so we are going to get some brief remarks from the Dean of the College of Social Science and Arts and Humanities at Addis Ababa University, Dr. Ezana Adweke. Hopefully this time around the technology is going to work in our favor.
Good day, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to address you on this important occasion of the African School of Decentralization. As Dean of the College of Social Sciences, Arts and Humanities at Addis Ababa University, I would like to begin by saying how grateful we are It's
that
truly a
Center of
pleasure to address you
and
on this
Governance
important
Studies
occasion of
has
the African
recently
School of
joined our
Decentralization.
newly formed college.
As Dean
This
of
is
the
a
College
very
of
welcome
Social Sciences,
development,
Arts and
one
Humanities
that
at Addis
expands
Ababa
our
University.
intellectual community
I would like to
and
begin by
strengthens
saying
our
how
capacity to
delightful we
engage
are
with some of the
that the
most
Center
pressing
of Federalism
governance
and
questions
Governance
facing
Studies
our
has
continent.
recently joined our
I have
newly
also
formed
learned
college.
about the long-standing
This is a very
collaboration
welcome
between
development,
the center
one that
and
expands
the
our
Dala
intellectual
Omar
community
Institute at the
and
University of
strengthens
West
our
Africa.
capacity to engage
The
with
fact
some
that
of the
these
most
two
pressing
institutions are
government
co-hosting
questions
the African School
facing
of
our continent
Decentralization
today.
is in itself
I have
a
also
powerful
learned about
testament
the
to that
long-standing
enduring
collaboration
partnership
between the
built
Center
over many years of
and
shared
the Dala
commitment to
Omar
democratic
Institute
governance,
at the University of West
decentralization,
Africa.
and academic
The fact
excellence.
that these two institutions
As
are
the college
co-hosting the
CEO,
African
I
School
want
of
to assure you
Decentralization
that
is
my
in
office
itself
is fully
a
committed
powerful
to deepening
testament
and
to that
broadening this
enduring
collaboration,
partnership.
both in
Built over
teaching
many
and
years of
research.
shared commitment to democratic
We see
governance,
great potential for
decentralization,
joint
and academic
programs,
excellence.
comparative studies, and
As the
scholarly
college
exchange
dean, I
that
want
will
to assure
continue
you
to
that
enrich
my
our
office is
institutions
fully committed
and,
to deepening
more
and broadening
importantly,
this
contribute to the
collaboration,
advancement
both
of
in
knowledge
teaching
and
and
practice
research.
in governance across
We
Africa.
see great potential for
Let me
joint
take this
academic
opportunity
programs,
to
comparative
congratulate all
studies,
the
and
participants
scholarly
selected for
exchange
the
that will
2025
continue to
African
enrich
School of
our
Decentralization.
institutions and,
I wish you
more
2 weeks of
importantly,
stimulating
contribute to the
learning,
advancement of
fruitful
knowledge and
exchange,
practice
and
in governance
inspiring
across
encounters.
Africa.
You are
Let
part
me
of a
take this
growing
opportunity
network
to
of African
congratulate
scholars
all
and
the
practitioners
participants selected
who
for
are
the
shaping the future of
2025 African
governance
School of
on our
Decentralization.
continent.
I
I
wish you
would
2
also
weeks
like to
of
extend my
stimulating
heartfelt
learning,
thanks to
fruitful
the
exchange,
co-hosts,
and
Professor
inspiring
Yap
encounters.
Defisser and
You are part
Dr.
of a
Zamela
growing
Montano,
network of African
and to
scholars
everyone
and
involved
practitioners
in organizing
who are
this year's
shaping the
program.
future of governance
My
on our
gratitude
continent.
also goes to
I would
Professor
also
Lucas
like to
Montaigne,
extend my
Director of
heartfelt
the
thanks
Dala Omar
to the
Institute,
co-hosts,
and
Professor
Dr.
Yap
Kedema
Defisser
Warjira,
and Dr.
Chair
Zamela
of the Center
Montano,
of Federalism
and to
and
everyone
Governance Studies,
involved in
for
organizing
their
this year's
continued
program.
leadership and collaboration.
My gratitude
Finally,
also goes to
I sincerely
Professor
hope
Lucas
that the
Montaigne,
2026
Director of the
edition
Dala
of
Omar
the African
Institute,
School of
and
Decentralization
to Dr.
will be
Kedema
held
Warjira,
here in Addis,
Chair
at
of
the
the
heart
Center
of
of
our
Federalism
continent
and Governance
and
Studies,
the home of the African
for their
Union.
continued leadership
We
and
look forward
collaboration.
to welcoming
Finally,
them.
I
Thank
sincerely
you,
hope
and I
that
wish you
the
a very
2026
successful
edition of the
engagement.
African School of Decentralization will be held here in Addis, at the heart of our continent and the home of the African Union. We look forward to welcoming you there. Thank you, and I wish you a very successful and enriching program.
Thank you. Those were the welcoming remarks from the Dean of the College of Social Science, Arts and Humanities at Addis Ababa University. Just to touch upon on something that he said in the last part of his input, he made reference to the fact that he's looking forward to us hosting the next edition, which will be the 6th one in Addis Ababa, and we're looking forward to that. The original idea behind the school is that it is hosted interchangeably between Cape Town and Addis Ababa. We have had some schools in Ethiopia, and hopefully in 2026 we'll be able to host the 6th edition of the African School and Decentralization in Addis. Okay, with that, this brings us to an end, the first part of the welcoming session, and I would like to thank you for a great start to the African School and Decentralization. And with this, I hand over to Prof. Yap Defisser, who's going to facilitate the next session, which involves the keynote address from the Executive Mayor of the City of Cape Town. Can you give ourselves a round of applause, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Chigwata. We're actually a little bit early. I think if we keep this up for the next 2 weeks, we'll be doing very well. But let's get straight into the next part of the opening ceremony. It gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Geordin Hill-Lewis, Executive Mayor of the City of Cape Town. When we conceptualized this program and we settled on the theme of decentralization and finances, it only took me about 30 seconds to think, who are we going to invite for the keynote? I must try to get our executive mayor to come and do that. And I was very grateful when his office almost immediately responded and said, no, we can make that happen. So I'm really grateful that he's able to be with us this morning and accepted our invitation to augment the opening of the ASD with a keynote address. Now, his bio is in the syllabus, and I'm sure you're all good students, you've all perused the syllabus. So with your permission, also your permission, Executive Mayor, I'm not going to go through the whole bio, because I also know that you're not someone who insists on a whole lot of pomp and ceremony, so I'm going to skip that part, if you don't mind. It's in there, and it's impressive. But I do want to highlight one or two things before I hand the floor to the Executive Mayor. Most of you, I would imagine most of you are visiting Cape Town for the first time, or maybe you've been here once or twice before. You would have immediately noticed what a beautiful city it is, nestled around the mountain, the ocean, Robben Island. It's a wonderful city. It's also a city that is well run. It stands out among the other 7 metropolitan municipalities in South Africa. It's a well-functioning government. Even if you don't agree with everything that the city decides or the policies that the city has, and even I have ambivalence here and there, but what's so wonderful about the city of Cape Town and the way it's being run is it's a visible and stable government. So it's also a government that you can disagree with, because there is a government there that you can talk to. And unfortunately, in some of our other cities around the country, we struggle with that. We don't even know who is in charge, because there's chopping and changing of leadership, and it's difficult to actually find a responsive local government that you can agree or disagree with. So I want to highlight that as an achievement of the mayor and his predecessors. The mayor is present and responsive. He's also vocal about decentralization, the overall topic of the school, and why we bring you together in this venue. And he's been arguing that cities must be equipped with the responsibilities or the powers that match the responsibilities of a large city: mobility, addressing crime, promoting the local economy, combating climate change. Empowerment of cities is a topic that the mayor has been vocal on, and it resonates with me and with the Institute and with the research that we do. I remember, for example, a meeting that we had in your office quite a number of years ago, where we spoke about the concept and the topic of devolution. And my colleague, Mrs. Tabile Onkos-Bambo, she's going to hate me for raising this, but she was there in the meeting, and she's has started off her PhD on the topic of devolution, which is now complete and has been submitted. I can't divulge the outcome, but we're all very confident, and I can assure you that very soon we can call Mrs. Tabile, call her Dr. Tabile. So, and all of that was also inspired by the meeting that we had at your office about the topic of devolution. You're also very vocal about the other sort of sub-theme, which is prudent financial management. That the city is entrusted with resources that it extracts from its citizens, from its businesses, in the form of property rates and sale of services and a range of other instruments. And it is well aware of the fact that it needs to look after those finances with a great sense of responsibility. And that is something that the city does on the whole very, very well. So, in my view, the mayor is someone who tells it like it is, without any unnecessary polemic or political speak, and certainly myself, I've always appreciated that very much. Mr. Mayor, there are 24 decentralization practitioners here from countries such as Zimbabwe, Kenya, Zambia, Eswatini, Tanzania, and further afield. They are here in your city to learn about decentralization, to learn from us, from each other, but also from you. So we very much look forward to your input, and if you're amenable to it, perhaps there's an opportunity for the participants to engage you with one or two questions, but we'll leave that up to you whether you are open to that. but we are in any event looking forward to your input. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. De Visser and the team from the African School on Decentralisation at the University of the Western Cape and the Dalla Omar Institute, and all the other colleagues and friends and supporters of the cause of decentralisation who are here. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk on this topic, which I'm very passionate about. And I really look forward to spending this time with you this morning discussing this topic. And I think probably the best discussion will happen in the question time. So I'm going to try and give a relatively brief overview, and then we can have more time to discuss some of your local context and questions in the discussion time. But firstly, let me just say thank you very much for the invitation, and welcome to all of you to the city of Cape Town. It's lovely to host you here in the mother city. I hope that this is not your first time, but if it is, then you are in for a real treat. And in the spirit of the conference, I also hope that you do not spend all of your time centralized in this room, but that you decentralize the conference to the bars and restaurants of Cape Town as well at the appropriate time. And it's great to hear that there is a soon-to-be Dr. Tubile. Who is the soon-to-be Dr. Tubile? Right there, excellent, excellent. I'm afraid though, and this is all credit to you, soon-to-be doctor, that you have finished your PhD before we have achieved the decentralization and the devolution that we wanted to, but that just motivates us more to work for this. I just want to say a little bit about why I'm passionate about this topic. If you look at the South African Constitution, and I'm afraid I'm simply not as familiar as I should be with all of the constitutions represented here in these Southern African or Sub-Saharan African democracies. But if you look at the South African Constitution, it affords local governments, city governments, actually quite a lot of executive power to make positive social change in our cities. And that is why I say with all seriousness that I really do think that being a mayor of a city in South Africa with our constitutional framework is one of the best jobs in politics in South Africa, if not the best jobs in politics in South Africa, because you really can effect meaningful, pragmatic, positive change through the powers afforded to local government. At the same time, being a practitioner in local government now, I can see the gaps, and I can see those places where you are not able to effect positive public change because you do not have the constitutional wherewithal, the legal wherewithal to effect the change in those policy areas. And some of those are absolutely critical areas. And I want to just give a brief overview of those areas before we start discussing finances, because obviously the two are inextricably linked. So I really do believe that you cannot run a major metropolitan city in any of our countries represented here. Cape Town is a metropolitan city of 5 million people. That might be bigger than most cities represented here, but soon, at some point in the coming years or decades, your city will also be a city of 5 million people. That is a demographic guarantee. And so you must think, how do you run a major metropolitan of 5 million people? And I really do believe it is not possible to effectively run a successful major metropolitan city anywhere in the world unless you run public transport. That, I think, is a sine qua non for running a successful city. It's a prerequisite. And in South Africa, we have this bizarre, antiquated system of centralized public transport, particularly in the rail space, the passenger rail space. And that is not something that is new to democratic South Africa, by the way. That is actually a hangover to the overly centralized state command and control economy that we had through the apartheid decades. And so this idea that the state had to control all aspects of the commanding heights of the economy and so run the entire freight rail and passenger rail system from Pretoria is actually a hangover of apartheid economic thinking. And what it means is that it makes it incredibly difficult to run public transport in our major cities. Because as anyone here who knows the ins and outs of public transport in major metropoles around the world, you will know that the rail system is the backbone of public transport. It is not the bus system, it is not the minibus taxi system. Those are important add-ons, but really, whether it be from London to Singapore to Hong Kong to Manila to Mumbai, you name it, it is the rail system that is the backbone of public transport in major metropoles. So it has been not an exercise in political point scoring or an attempt to do empire building, which is what our opponents have most often accused us of when we talk about devolution, but actually just a practical understanding in how to build a more successful city for the future, a city that's more connected, where people can get around more easily and more cheaply, that we have pushed very hard. It's out of that understanding that we've pushed very hard for the devolution or the decentralization of passenger rail in South Africa, and which we are still kind of hammering away at. And there's an important democratic principle, and this is really I presume, because you're here at the school, that you support the idea of decentralizing government functions closer to the people who consume those functions. I think that's a really important democratic principle that almost always achieves better outcomes for the public. That when a service and accountability for that service is located closer to the consumers of that service, you will get better public outcomes. And this is something that I really believe. In Cape Town, for example, right now, if you were to go down to your local train station and your train runs 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes late or doesn't show up at all, who do you hold accountable for that failure? You cannot hold me accountable because I'm not responsible for the trains at all. You can't hold the provincial government accountable. They're not responsible for the trains at all. You have to hold some very distant bureaucrat in Pretoria, someone you've never heard of and who has never heard of you. That is the person that you have to try to hold accountable. And that accountability connection is incredibly dislocated, distant, and ineffectual. And so if we compress that dislocation and bring accountability closer to where the consumption of the service happens, then I think you will get better public outcomes over the long term. So that is why we are so passionate about it, for the practical reason of how to run a big city and for the accountability and democratic principle. And similarly, in the crime fighting space in South Africa, again, we have this big, very lethargic, very kind of lumpy national police service. One national police service for an enormous country, and the public outcomes, again, are generally, I'm afraid, extremely poor, with South Africa's well-documented high crime rates as a consequence. And so, again, if you are concerned about crime in your community, constitutionally speaking, it's impossible to hold your city government accountable for that. Or it's not impossible, lots of residents do, but they are actually mistaken or misplaced. It's not the city government's responsibility, it's not the provincial government's responsibility, and you have very little impact on the national government's sense of accountability when it comes to crime fighting and combating criminality. And so again, we have argued very strongly that for democratic accountability, you've got to bring that point of accountability closer to the people, and for better public outcomes. Now, what we've actually done in Cape Town over the years, because in our constitutional framework, the city governments do have limited, very limited criminal enforcement powers, mainly to traffic enforcement and municipal bylaw enforcement. But we've really tested and expanded those words in the Constitution and tried to give them the broadest possible definition. And the analogy I always use is, if you are sitting on the beach at Camps Bay, one of our lovely beaches here in Cape Town, and in the summer the beach is packed, and you've got to get some space for yourself on the beach because all the people are sitting close to you. And so what you do is you start with your little towel that you're sitting on, and then slowly but surely you put another towel over there, and no one really notices. And now you've got 2 towels worth of space. And then on this side you put your top down, your jacket or your jersey or whatever, and you make a little bit more space that way. And then over there you put your shorts over there, and you've got a little bit more space that way. And then without anyone even noticing, you've actually got enough space for you and your family on the beach. And that's kind of been our approach to how we have expanded our policing mandate in Cape Town over the years. We've just done a little bit more at a time to try and get better outcomes in the policing space. And of course, this is where we are soon to come to finances. We've done that entirely at our own cost. There's been no subsidy or financial support for that. We've done that at the cost of the public of Cape Town. But we've felt it essential and necessary to get better public outcomes in the crime space in the city. And simultaneously to that, alongside that, we've argued very strongly for the formal decentralization or devolution of additional criminal policing powers, so that we can actually take on these things officially, so that there might be some budgetary support for them, and that we can improve the results that we get. So, in a range of public policy areas, Cape Town has sought to be at the forefront of making the decentralization argument. And we really do think that over the coming years in South African politics, and even frankly over the coming decades, we think this is going to be one of the biggest themes of South African constitutional development and legal development. And this is a very, very exciting space to be in. A few years ago, this was an unheard of topic of public debate and discussion. And really the Dalo Omar Institute and Prof. De Visser and his colleagues have really been at the forefront of opening this space for debate in the country. And we really want to insert ourselves into that debate and be at the forefront of it. If you think about the political shifts that have happened in South Africa this last year, or 14, 15 months in particular, it's opened up whole new possibilities. Now all of a sudden you've got different governments, new governments in the KwaZulu-Natal provincial government. You've got very likely a whole swathe of new governments across cities across the country next year. You've got new governments in other provinces, potentially in Gauteng, and even where you have governments that are still led by the ANC, like in Gauteng, provincial governments that is, you have them even speaking up for more decentralization and devolution, and backing all of the arguments that we have made as very unlikely allies and supporters. But nevertheless, we appreciate that, and we're joining hands on that. So I think that this is a fascinating space in the coming years of South African politics, and we're going to keep driving it. One of the kind of analogies that I often use is the way that we achieved democratization of the energy space in South Africa. Remember, or there may be those of you who don't know, that 3 years ago, just 3 years ago, in terms of national development, that is the blink of an eye. Just 3 years ago, it was completely illegal in South Africa to buy power from any other source other than Eskom. So just like trains, just like policing. We had this enormous, bulky, centralized national utility that had a legislated monopoly and was achieving extremely poor public results, entirely predictably. That's what big, bulky, lethargic, legislated monopolies always achieve, very bad public results. And it was illegal. It was actually illegal to buy power from any other source. And as a result of all of the pressure from organized business, who were facing the crisis of load shedding, and all of the pressure from residents across the country who were really sick and tired of load shedding and having to install their own generators and solar panels and so on, and the cost thereof, we saw this, and those of us in the center making the political argument for the democratization of the energy sector, we saw this rapid crumbling of that legislated monopoly. Very rapid, such that now we have really an incredibly democratized energy system in South Africa. Obviously, all the investment must still catch up with that opportunity because it's very new, this legal framework. And so we still have a very fragile energy grid, even though we haven't had load shedding for a while. But it is now legal to buy power from whomever you want. As a city, we can contract with independent power producers. We can totally leave Eskom behind, as we are rapidly trying to do. And that is wonderful. But the lesson from that, and this is why I tell you the story, the lesson from that is that sometimes it might seem like this decentralization wave or trend is not working out in your favor. And you've got to just keep knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking at that door. And sooner, rather than later, or maybe sometimes when you least expect it, you will see a crumbling, a shake-up, and things will change. And I really do think that that is what will happen here in South Africa in the years ahead. Last point on this before I get to the finances. I read this fascinating piece over the weekend in the Financial Times on the evolution of the American First Amendment. The American First Amendment is the amendment which guarantees free expression. It says that Congress or the government may never pass any piece of legislation which undermines free expression and free speech and the freedom of the press in America. A very, very important cornerstone of the incredible advancement that America has had over the centuries, even though it is currently under assault. Free expression is under assault in America. But what was so fascinating was to read how we assume, because we are here in the 21st century, and the First Amendment was passed in 1789, 300 years ago, that we assume that is the natural state of things. It must have been always like that. But in fact, there was a hectic political fight for many years to get the First Amendment passed. And the lesson that I drew from that actually got nothing to do with free expression, is that some things which we assume we take for granted politically and constitutionally now actually have long and twisted up and down histories. And they take resilience, perseverance, determination to fight for and push for. And so I think that when we look back on this period in South Africa's history in, say, 30 or 40 years' time, we will say, oh, that was the period where we actually had to push for decentralization. And from the vantage point of 20 or 30 years' time, we will say, well, this is such a given. Power is decentralized, rail is decentralized, policing is decentralized, so many finances are more decentralized. How did this all come to be? Well, it came to be because people like you, people like me, people like others like us in politics kept on making the arguments. So don't give up, even if it is rough and stony soil. Keep going. We are certainly going to keep going here. Now let me talk quickly about the financial challenges. Again, I said if you know a little bit about South Africa's constitutional framework, you'll know that one of the most important things about local government is that we have a relative degree of financial autonomy. So around 70% of Cape Town's budget is raised from Cape Town's residents. We have our own taxation system, we have our own revenue collection system, and it accounts for just over 70% of our budget. That gives us a great degree of relative, let me not say great, that I think would be an overstatement, gives us a relatively strong degree of policy autonomy. And that is a wonderful position to be in. As I said, it is very different to other spheres of government. Our provincial governments in South Africa, of which we have 9, have got absolutely no revenue raising capacity at all. They raise a few rands in gambling taxes, that's it. And other than that, they depend 99% on the national state transferring funds to them. And that, of course, gives them very little policy autonomy and makes it incredibly hard for them to push for alternative policy approaches, to trial and test and pilot different things. So in addition to the 70, 71, 72% that we raise ourselves, a further 5 or 6% is guaranteed to us via what's called in South Africa the equitable share, which is a portion of the national tax revenue that is distributed to the towns and cities via a legislated formula. And the formula roughly goes on how many people live in your city, how many of those people are poor, how many of them need subsidized education and so on, subsidized services and so on. So that portion is also more or less guaranteed. So that means that around 75 or 76% of our budget is actually, does not rely on the beneficence, on the generosity of, or the political policy making choices of the national state. And that gives us a great degree of autonomy. However, before I sound too kind of blushed with confidence of our own autonomy, let me say that 25% of your budget is a huge chunk of your budget. Those of you who are in finances in the state where you come from will know that if someone were to remove 25% of your budget, you would be in deep trouble. So it is not to say that with that, just because we have 75% of our own revenue raising abilities, we have no problems with fiscal autonomy. That is not the case at all. So where are the biggest problem points? Firstly, the problem points come in the fact that 5 or 6% that is given to us by dint of this formula called the equitable share is extremely out of date. It doesn't keep a pace with the growth of our city. So our city grows very rapidly, large numbers of people moving to the cities at all times, and that formula isn't adjusted accordingly. And so we lose out proportionately based on the number of people who need subsidized services in our city. Secondly, over years we have developed these things called unfunded mandates. We are required to do things, but we are not given any public subsidy for them. So for example, or we are given tiny fractions of the subsidy that we need. For example, Cape Town runs a very wonderful public library service across the city, in our townships, in our less privileged areas, in our less formal areas, in our neighborhoods. We've got fantastic public libraries. But what the public doesn't know is that costs us about 550 million rand a year, about $30 million to run that public library system. And we are compensated to the tune of about $2 million, or perhaps even slightly less than that. Yes, even slightly less than that, to supposedly run library services. So there's this huge unfunded portion. Now, if we had to stick our library service to only that which we received, we would probably have 3 or 4 libraries, and they wouldn't be able to serve many people. Similarly, in our public health clinics, we run a series of 97 public health clinics in the city, overwhelmingly, in fact, almost exclusively located in poorer communities. They deliver wonderful, very high standard of public health care, community level primary health care, that's the word, primary health care. Anything tertiary goes to our tertiary hospital system. But that series of 97 clinics, all the doctors, the nurses, the medication, chronic medication, all of that costs us about 1.6 billion rand a year. What is that? That's about, it's about 80, 90, about 90 million US dollars, let's say. 90 million to 100 US dollars. And for which we receive less than half. We receive about 20 million US dollars in funding for that service. So again, if we were to run a service that was strictly attached to the fiscal allocation we receive, we would have probably 30 community clinics rather than 97. So clearly not a sustainable position. We have to fund that ourselves. And that is funded by the public of Cape Town. We fund it from our own rate space. Now, we are arguing very strongly in our decentralization drive that not only must the function be decentralized in rail, in policing, we're happy to permanently take on the, de facto we already permanently are responsible for the libraries and clinics function. We're happy to take that on de facto and de jure, but not only must the function be centralized, but the fiscal must follow function. Fiscal must follow function. And this is an argument that we have to raise more loudly in South Africa in the years ahead. Fiscal must follow function. For those of you who are in the national or local treasuries where you work, you will know those who carry the checkbook, they are the ones who really call the tune. When I was, prior to being a mayor, I was in the National Assembly in Parliament for a number of years, and the Treasury Portfolio Committee, Finance Portfolio Committee was my committee, so I worked very closely with the Treasury. And I saw how it didn't matter what this other department says about their programs and policies and plans of action for the years ahead. Unless it was supported by the National Treasury, unless it was matched with a budgetary allocation, it was dead. It had zero prospect of success. So I could see also the pent-up frustration and animosity between the other departments and the Treasury. Where the Department of Trade and Industry would say, we have all these plans, all these master plans, and Treasury would say, no you don't. You can have all the master plans you want, but they have a budget allocation of zero. And that's what really decided whether that program would go ahead. So we have to have this argument with Treasury that if you want these public services to succeed, currently you are throwing good money after bad in subsidizing a rail service or funding rather, a rail service or police service that is not achieving the adequate results. And so it is better to move that function and to move those finances down to a local level. Similarly, in our ability to fund our infrastructure drive, that is where the most of that other 25% actually comes from, in our ability to fund our own infrastructure. Again, those of you who work in the infrastructure space, you will know how expensive infrastructure is. When you talk about infrastructure, at least in South African rands, it's almost impossible to talk about millions. You only talk about billions when it comes to big infrastructure. And so there we are incredibly reliant on the national state to help us fund that infrastructure program. Now, one of the things that we have pushed in the decentralization space here is trying to raise our own infrastructure finance. And this is incredibly important for you as well. Again, we are very blessed to have this constitutional framework which allows local governments to borrow ourselves. We have to borrow in South African rand, We have to borrow in local currency, so we can't borrow in dollars, in hard currency, but we can borrow. And that means that we can even borrow internationally, so long as we can convert it to rands at the point of borrowing. And that gives us tremendous wherewithal to try to increase our sense of fiscal autonomy and fund greater levels of infrastructure investment and achieve more of that functionality that Prof. De Visser very kindly spoke about. Because functionality is so often, well, certainly at a city space, it's just a function of infrastructure investment. So what we've done is we've gone to reach out and build relationships with international development banks. And to be honest, Treasury has been a bit uncomfortable with this. We've had some tough conversations with them about the closeness of the relationship we are building with the World Bank. But we have said unashamedly that if you cannot fund the infrastructure we need, the alternative is that we accept failure. And that is not an alternative that we are prepared to even countenance. We will not accept infrastructure failure. So we will go and try and row our own canoe and find that funding elsewhere. So we've built up relationships with a bank called JICA, which is the Japanese Development Agency, with the AFD, with the KfW, with the British Development Bank, with the World Bank, with the IFC. And we are increasingly accessing financing at rates, much better rates than we can achieve here in South Africa, and with better terms in terms of length of that debt, so that we can fund our own infrastructure. And that, again, increases our sense of kind of fiscal autonomy and ability to try new things. We're also deliberately pioneering off-balance sheet funding mechanisms. So we have got 3 public-private partnerships currently under planning in Cape Town. One of them is the largest water reuse plant in the world. One of them is a medium-sized desalination plant. And the third is a sludge bioreactor, basically a gas to energy plant from our wastewater treatment works. 3 very significantly sized PPPs funded entirely off the Cape Town balance sheet. That allows you to unlock much more infrastructure investment without reliance on the national state, essentially allowing you to decentralize infrastructure financing. And then finally, we're also pioneering things like infrastructure bonds, and particularly green infrastructure bonds, which are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and which allow us to leverage our credit rating, which is higher at a domestic level, is a very high credit rating, higher than the sovereign, and allows us to access funding at a better rate for infrastructure finance on the domestic market. And those bonds have been a smashing success when we've issued them so far, and we are going to issue more of them in the months and years ahead. The idea being, this is really the ethos behind it all, and this is where I'll draw to a close. If you are not given the wherewithal to deliver what you need to build a successful city, then the option is not between that status quo and some other possibility of success. If you are not given the wherewithal, you are being forced into a position of accepting failure in public outcomes. And we have said, if you can boil down our kind of motivating spirit, our motivating ethos here in Cape Town to one simple thing, is that South Africa has become far too comfortable with very poor public outcomes. We refuse to accept that outcome in Cape Town. What we want to show is that you can have success in public policy and public governance. That you, despite these huge challenges that we have in our society, you can still move forward. You can still get more people out of poverty. You can still have a functional, successful city. We do not need to accept the reverse gear that South Africa has sadly been stuck in for the last decade. we want to show that South Africa still has got forward gears in our gearbox. We've still got a number 1 gear and a number 2 gear and even higher than that. And so we've worked really hard to grow our sense of policy autonomy and fiscal autonomy so that we can push that gearbox into first gear, get it out of reverse gear, and show our public, show our country that we can still build a successful city and thereby also a successful country. And that is why I believe so deeply and passionately in the cause of decentralization, and why, if I can leave you with any one thing, you're obviously here because you're interested in it, but keep pushing for it. It will, over time, in the years, even perhaps decades ahead, when you are sitting, reclining and enjoying retirement, you can look back and say, well, that was something really worthwhile fighting for, because just look at the positive difference it has made in my country or my town or my province. And that is something really worthwhile doing in your career. So all the best for your next 2 weeks here. Have a great time in Cape Town. Thank you.
Wonderful, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for those very thoughtful and inspiring words. I can't think of a better way to get this 2 weeks going, because there's so much in what you spoke about that resonates with what we're about to discuss over the next 2 weeks. One or two things I want to latch onto, which I'm also passionate about, is one of the topics that we'll be talking about this week is why decentralization? Why? Why complicate your state so much by having all these levels and bickering over who does what? Why not just all have it one at the center, keep it simple? And we'll be discussing the motivations for why decentralize. And one of the key motivations that I still think is the most convincing one for me, and it's very hard to dispute, is the value of decentralization for democracy. And I think that's also what the mayor highlighted, that here in South Africa we have a robust democracy. We have had competitive elections, and the combination of a free and fair electoral system with a system of decentralization, if you combine those two, it means, very simply put, you are going to have, at some point, in the near future, or now or later, you're going to have different governments at different levels that will not all belong to the same movement, party, coalition. Now, that's something that on the African continent we're not necessarily very good at managing. What happens when a city goes to a political party that's not the same as the party that runs the national government? I see a colleague from Rwanda is smiling. That's not easy to come to terms with. And in some of the countries on the continent, we've seen all kinds of consequences of that. And you may think of your own country, how do we manage that when there is competition, political competition between levels of government? And you can reflect on how that was dealt with in your own country. Here in South Africa, we've had, at some point, cities starting to go to other political parties than the party that at that point ran the national government. Some of us held our breath. What's going to happen? Are we going to see problems? Are we going to see court action? Are we going to perhaps even see violence? Will finances still be paid to those cities that are no longer run by the same political party as the national? We had all kinds of doom scenarios that we were going through. But guess what happened? Life went on. We coped, and give credit to the ruling party at the time. Of course, they were grumpy about it, they didn't like it, and they bicker, and there's competition, and there's disagreement, and there's sometimes even court action, but the system ticks over. The system continues, democracy prevailed. We're now in a different situation where we have different coalitions at different levels of government, another dimension to this concept of what does decentralization combined with competitive democracy, what does that do for the long-term health of your democracy? I think a very valuable point that the mayor raised. The other point I think I would want to highlight is the relative strength of the city of Cape Town, and also other cities and towns and municipalities in the country in terms of their ability to raise their own revenue. And we know that across the continent, there's also something, that there are varying degrees of success with. To what extent is your system of local government, to what extent are your municipalities, your local authorities empowered and enabled to raise their own revenue? Something we will discuss as we go through the next 2 weeks as an important element of this concept of decentralization, because you can decentralize responsibilities and task levels of government with all kinds of responsibilities, but if it doesn't follow, if it's not followed by fiscal responsibilities and fiscal powers, you are achieving a different kind of decentralization, which one may argue is actually a form of controlling from the center. Anyway, lots to discuss, lots to reflect on. With your permission, Mr. Mayor, if we can maybe take a few questions. We've got very eager students here. I see their hands coming up. That's fantastic. We've got also a whole battery of learned professors here on the right who may also want to pitch in. But let's take a few questions and then over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Mayor, for that very insightful address. Just 2 questions. One is, in a city of 5 million people, I'm sure the issues of inequalities are inevitable. Walking through the city yesterday evening, I think I was able to see, very good infrastructure, functional public transport system, and so on, which is good work, I think, to the entire system. But how are you handling issues of inequalities, especially with income? Is it an approach of public service, or do you have social protection schemes? How are you handling it so that you're not focused on the big stuff and you're talking about livelihoods? Number 2 is the question of do you have incidences of decentralization? Probably we will be discussing here in the next 2 weeks, but from your experience, I think you've been here long enough. Have you had the experience of decentralization, and how have you handled it? Because I see you're pushing forward in terms of broadening the functional boundaries. And finally, you talked about public borrowing. That one interested me. What are the securities for that borrowing at the decentralized level, and what accountability mechanisms are there in place to prevent abuse of those resources?
Thank you so much. Quick point before I forget. Let's take an example of this question. Nice and short and sweet. Let's keep our questions as short as possible so that we can have a nice engagement. And maybe briefly introduce yourself, just 2 or 3 sentences. We don't know each other yet. We'll all get to know each other over the next 2 weeks, but very briefly introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Ivan Skibet from Kenya. I am a champion of devolution working with the civil society.
Right, next question.
Thank you very much. I'm Silvestre Nzahabwanayo, Associate Professor at the University of Rwanda, but also Director of the Institute of Research and Dialogue for Peace. This is a think tank that conducts research on governance, citizen participation, and social protection. A quick one. Does the concept of community policing work here in Cape Town? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Caroline Cherop. I am a parliamentary officer working with the Parliament of Kenya, specifically the Senate, which is tasked with overseeing and protecting the interests of the devolved counties. The devolved units. We call them counties. In my country, Kenya, we have 47 counties. And the concept of devolution is a very ideal idea, and I wish you well as you consider this. Once you go to devolution, you cannot come back. And this is the issue we have in Kenya, where we have overrepresentation. In this case, the Senate does oversighting over these devolved units, but also their own at the local level. They have people call them members of the county assemblies. They also do oversight. And so we have issues where, and this is where the question is coming from, where the members of the county assemblies come from the same political party as the governor. So now the question of oversight becomes skewed, because then it will be, I am oversighting my own person, I'm oversighting a governor who comes from my own party. How do you deal with that? And then the issue of overrepresentation, how are you dealing with it? Because the issue of devolution is that you have to decentralize up to the local level, meaning you'll have so many politicians. How do you deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I'm going to take one or two more, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then we go back to you. Right.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tawa. The surname is Lakhalamitra. I'm from the Northern Cape, a fellow South African like yourself, Mayor. Firstly, let me take this opportunity to wish the City of Cape Town to congratulate you on the unqualified audit reports. I've lost count. Of the 257 municipalities countrywide and of the 8 metros, I think you are one of those doing well. And we want to thank you for that. 2 questions from my side. You spoke of 97 primary healthcare facilities or clinics, and that the municipality is spending close to 1.6 billion per annum, if I heard you well. My question is, you are only getting half, and I suppose that is from the Department of Health. Now my question is, are there any potential future risks in terms of sustainability going forward with regards to that one? And then secondly, of the 5 million city residents, how many are indigents? And of those who are indigents, how does the city deals with foreign nationals who perhaps, based on the credit control policy of the municipality, may be excluded for obvious reasons, or perhaps based on the municipal policies? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, let's take one more and then we go to the mayor.
Thank you. My name is Kiamukhetso Maupa. I'm a procurement specialist as well as managing the portfolio within South Africa for municipalities. I was part of the IFC team that actually awarded City of Cape Town the loan in infrastructure funding. So my question is around that infrastructure funding. I want to know, in terms of pioneering off balance sheet, you mentioned 3 projects so far. Have they all been funded, and what are the others that you're looking at within the city?
Thank you so much. So that's already quite a lot. So over to you, Mr. Mayor, for a few observations.
Thank you very much for those really great questions. Okay. It looks like, is your other surname also Boss? What a great surname. You are the boss. So, Mr. Gibbett, okay, let's talk about inequalities. Obviously, South Africa has extreme inequality, and the way that we address that from a city perspective within our mandate is through public services. So we essentially tax wealthy, more valuable properties much more highly. So properties around here, for example, and people that live around here and businesses that are located around here pay much, much higher levels of tax. And then that is cross-subsidized to fund either fully or partially or fully free services in poorer communities. And so indigent residents in Cape Town, and this links to the question later about indigent residents, receive either heavily subsidized or entirely free public services like water and sanitation and trash collection and healthcare and primary healthcare and so on. So that system of tax cross-subsidization is how we fundamentally address inequalities. And what are the, if you look at this, the social services or the public services that we provide, it is our public transport system is subsidized So poorer residents will pay cheaper prices. All those basic services that I just spoke about, water and sanitation and trash collection and roads and lighting and so on. Our electricity prices would be subsidized for those residents. Then in the healthcare system, all your community facilities, swimming pools, libraries, and all of that is obviously delivered free of charge. Then in your healthcare system, those clinics that I spoke about are free to the user. Obviously not, not free to the city, but free to the user. And keep in mind that that includes chronic medication. So everyone who is diabetic, high blood pressure, any kind of chronic medication they can pick up at their local clinic every month. And that's free of charge. So there's a lot of social cross subsidies built into the system that helps to support the poorer residents and to bring down that inequality. But of course, I'm always at pains to say the biggest inequality is formed or driven by unemployment. So all those free services do not make up for the fact that the person doesn't have a job, which is why everything that we do in the city is focused on growing our economy faster so we can get more people into work through all of our tourism investments and infrastructure investments and so on. I'm glad you asked the question about re-centralization. That is something that we see, yes, because from the national government's perspective, they see all these examples of local government failure across the country. 257 local governments in the country, of which the vast majority of them are delivering extremely poor public outcomes. So then the tendency or the temptation is always to say, if you can't get these things right, we're going to take it back from you. We're going to re-centralize. And so some of our battle, you are absolutely right, is to resist that and to say you cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. I understand if there is an example of absolute dire failure, the Constitution does allow for certain direct interventions. But you cannot take this approach of simply taking away powers in a uniform manner. So we have to fight that battle as well, you're right. Then accountability mechanism for public borrowing. So there's the formal accountability mechanisms. Obviously, all of this is tabled publicly. People can follow all of our financial results. If those instruments are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the stock exchange has a whole lot of accountability mechanisms. The banks themselves have accountability mechanisms. All of those are formalistic and quite contractual. But of course, the most important accountability is always public accountability. And that is, hopefully, if the public sees that you are borrowing money and then wasting it, you will get punished for that. That is what we see happening in Joburg, by the way. Cape Town only borrows money to invest in infrastructure. We do not borrow any money to invest in or to pay for operational costs. That is a very hard and fast rule in our city. We borrow to invest only. Whereas in other cities like Johannesburg, unfortunately, they are borrowing to pay salaries. That is a very, very dangerous and difficult position to be in. But fortunately, we see the democratic accountability processes working. They may have taken longer than we would have liked, but to be honest, I'm not a gambling person, but if I had to put money on it, I think there will be democratic change in Johannesburg. Partly as a result of that very poor management. Then community policing, I'm not entirely sure what your definition of community policing is, but basically the way that it works in South Africa is that you have quite a centralized police system that those local police stations are supposed to have good community relationships with their neighborhood watches. They have something called the Community Policing Forum. But to be honest with you, it does not work that well. One of the things that we have tried to do as a city, using as I said to you, our kind of stealth approach of getting more space on the beach, is to reassert some old-fashioned community policing where we have officers that are dedicated to a neighborhood. They know all the naughty children, they know the neighborhood watch chairperson, they know the local councillor, and they can form a community policing relationship. That is still very much a work in progress. So I'm tempted to say, in simple response to your answer, no, but we aspire to have proper community policing. Okay, then I think it's a really good question about oversight from your own party, because I have this as well. We have a series of oversight committees in the city of Cape Town, and all of them have got a majority of their members that come from my party. And so the temptation is that there isn't really any rigorous or vigorous oversight that happens in those committees, that it's just easy rides and sweetheart questions. And I saw that in action as a member of parliament, because as I said, I came from the National Assembly where there was in all the years that I was there was a strong ANC majority. Obviously that is wonderfully changed now, but in all the committees that I was a member of, every tough question was just squashed, every attempt to get to the bottom of something was just swept under the carpet, and the minister who was appearing before us was actively protected by the members of his own committee, by his own party on the committee. So when I became the mayor, I actually got all of our committee chairs together and I said, your purpose, what is your name? Your name is Oversight Committee. Your purpose is to hold us accountable. It does the public no good, and it frankly does me no good if I just go to committees and get a whole lot of sweetheart questions. We were just wasting our time. If we want to get better public outcomes, we have to vigorously hold the government of the day accountable, and those councillors, we call them councillors here, have to understand their constitutional responsibility to do that. So it really actually ticks me off when I get sweetheart questions in council, and I often follow that up with them and say, don't do that again. Do not do that again. You are here to hold this government accountable. No one wins from weak, limp-wristed accountability. Then there are definitely future sustainability risks, Thabo, in our health clinics. Our biggest risk is the amount of money we spend on chronic medication, actually. Chronic medication is extremely expensive, and there are a growing number of people in our society that need diabetes medication, HIV medication, blood pressure medication, you name it, all of the chronic illnesses. And that bill mounts every year. So that is a real sustainability issue. Then we take a blanket approach to identifying indigent residents, because we have about 600,000 indigent residents in Cape Town. So, if we were to individually assess each of them, I would probably have to hire a team of about 2,000 people just to do those individual assessments. So it's not possible. I think the way that was thought out was maybe thought for some small town where there's only 1,000 indigent people. But in a major metropole, you cannot do individual assessments of indigency. So we do blanket indigency. So basically, if you live in a less formal area or an indigent or a township area, the city regards that as indigent, and then you receive the free or subsidized services. And then if you live outside of those areas and you still are indigent, then you can apply on an individual basis. So we keep the application numbers down to a minimum by just being very generous with our approach and saying basically everyone that lives here we classify as indigent, and we provide the subsidized services. And I think people might say it costs us more because there are people inside there that are not indigent. But on the other hand, think of what it would cost us to have 2,000 people going through the individual applications on an annual basis. That would probably cost hundreds of millions as well. So, and then, yes, the other thing is foreign nationals. Of course, if you are a foreign national living in a township in Cape Town, you are also benefiting from free services. You are. And that's, that's constitutionally protected. The only one where we refuse to do that because it's just simply not sustainable to do it, is with public housing. So there is a legal debate in South Africa as to whether foreign nationals qualify for public housing. We are of the view that they do not. And by the way, I'm only speaking about illegal, undocumented foreign nationals. And our argument is that they do not qualify. And so this is still to be decided by the courts. But for now, we provide public housing only to South African citizens and people who have legal status. Then PPPs. Yes, well, thank you very much for your role in approving that financing, and please keep it coming. That's all I can say to that is we've got a lot more infrastructure that we need to fund. So no, not all of those PPPs are funded. They are going to market soon, and then the idea is that we will raise funding for them. Sorry, this is giving a bit of feedback. The idea is that we'll raise funding for them once they are in the market. And because they are linked to clear revenue streams, PPPs generally have to be linked to a clear revenue stream. In the one case, it's fresh drinking. In two cases, the desalination and water reuse is linked to fresh drinking water, which we then obviously on-sell in the city and raise revenue from that. So there's a clear infrastructure outlay investment and a clear revenue stream. And then the other one is a gas to power generator. Of course, there again is a clear revenue stream. So we won't have trouble raising finance for it. But no, they're not done yet. And yes, we are looking at many more others. Again, because it has to be linked to a clear revenue stream, it's not appropriate for everything. You can't fund roads with PPPs. You can't fund street lights with PPPs. You even pipe replacement programs. We have a massive pipe upgrade program. But a water pipe is not linked to water revenue. So it's hard to actually do that as a PPP. So, but where we can do a clear revenue link, we are definitely investigating doing so.
Right, thank you very much. Is there time for another short round, or are you pressed for time? Okay, wonderful. I have one question here from the professor. He's asked for a little bit of privilege. That's okay.
All right. Thank you so much. It's always about the students, but yeah, professors are also students. So just a quick one from me.
I've got a big voice.
Yeah, just a quick one from me. I'm also a proponent of devolution. But in the South African context, like elsewhere on the continent, is it devolution to all cities or municipalities, or devolution to selected cities? And if you are going to go for selected cities, on what basis or criteria are you going to say this city, but yes to this city, but no to this other one? Thank you.
Great question.
Thank you. Let's do a quick inventory because we will not be able to take all questions. I see Fadila had her hand up for a while. And here's another professor. Professors always give them their thing. So Lucas, and then Fadila, and you ma'am in the corner. And then see how far we can go. Sorry guys, I won't be able to take everyone.
Thank you, I'll be brief. I take an interest in the National Prosecution Service, and it's a highly centralized function. So my question to you is, you have some delegated authority to prosecute traffic offences and so on, but what is that other inch that you would like, that other area that would assist the city in dealing especially with corruption, fraud, maladministration, where the National Prosecuting Authority need to come in, and where you may even receive additional delegated authority? Thank you.
Fadila.
Thank you. I'm Fadila, a student. I'm a student at the Development Art Institute. I have a few questions for you, sir. So, firstly, metropolitan councils may decentralize powers and functions to sub-councils and to wards. So, in terms of your belief in decentralization, does that extend to the ward councils for particular functions of metros, for example, parks and recreation, which does sometimes get neglected in certain areas because of red tape and things like that? And then you mentioned particular critical areas that you believe metropolitan cities need to have control over in order to function, and in that you included public transport and policing. I wonder why you chose those, and is there a reason for not including education, or would you include education as one of those critical areas? Because, as you mentioned earlier, employment is one of the biggest factors leading to the inequality that we face in the city of Cape Town, is one of the most unequal in terms of income disparity locations in the country. And so, in terms of managing the employment and that inequality, do you think that policing is more effective than education in terms of that encouraging the economy, or is there any other reason for that? And then I also asked to reflect on what it means for taxes to turn a profit, like ethically.
So what do you mean by that?
So for example, metros have the power to add surcharges on particular taxes, property rates, electricity, etc. When those fees are being charged and not directly going into sustaining the electricity production or the maintenance of properties, and they're going to the discretion of the council to apply wherever, whether it be infrastructure projects or whatever that council decides. What is the ethics of that? Yeah.
Good morning all. My name is Scholastica Lute Bukusa. I'm from Namibia, and I work for the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development under the Directorate of Decentralization Coordination. I just have one question for you. You have mentioned that part of your budget, a small percentage of your budget comes from the state. I just wanted to note, are you required to submit accountability reports to the central government? And if it's like that, how often do you do that?
Right, we're going to take the last one, and in the spirit of geographic spread and decentralization from somewhere here. So, I'm going to go for the email.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mayor. My question is about unemployment. You mentioned that unemployment is the biggest inequality. What are you doing to curb that? That is my question.
Well, that one was so nice and short.
Well,
squeeze in one more.
The question is short, the answer is not.
Thank you very much. My name is Colin Zinjera. I'm from Kenya. I work at the Parliament, specifically the Senate and the Senate Liaison Office. My question is on the revenue raising. And in Kenya, we have specifically two, which is the on-source revenue and the intergovernmental grant. And I think Cape Town is doing very well in terms of on-source revenue. And in the intergovernmental grant, you mentioned that you receive 5% of that tops up into the over 70% that you generate on-source revenue. And my question, the first question is, what is the national percentage of what is supposed to go to the local governments? And the other one is on the infrastructure funds that you get. Does that come, because you said you highly depend on the national government, does that come as a conditional grant? Because in Kenya, for the counties, it comes as a conditional grant. We have, on top of the equitable share, we have the conditional grants that usually is given to counties to run specific national government projects in the counties. So for you guys, does that come as a conditional grant, or does it come and then the the local government decides where the infrastructure fund will go? Thank you.
Great. Okay, some really excellent questions there. Starting with the excellent one from you, Prof. So no, I always advocate for well, let me put it this way, I never advocate for a one-size-fits-all approach. I don't think that that's right. And I mean, that runs counter to the logic of decentralization, is that, the idea is that those places which are capable of taking over additional delegated powers and services should be able to do so. And so this phrase that you often hear is the phrase capable metros. And I love that this came from the national state itself. In their 2022 decision to decentralize passenger rail, they said, you know, passenger rail will be decentralized to quote-unquote capable metros. And that means that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and I really support that. And I've advocated that for a long time. And one of the things that I've often discussed, I often re-emphasize this to national government ministers, even to the president when I have the occasion to discuss it with him, is that we should not be afraid of policy experimentation. Because if public outcomes are poor, and hopefully we can agree that many public outcomes in South Africa are poor, that we should be willing to try other things and see if we can get better results from those things. And that is not something to be afraid of. That is something actually I think to welcome and to encourage actually. And that means asymmetric decentralization, where we could try something here and see if it works and then apply it elsewhere. Or we could try something else here and see if it works there and apply it elsewhere. So I'm in favor of asymmetric decentralization. Then on the NPA, great question as well. The next inch for us is investigations powers. So not necessarily directly prosecutorial powers, but so many of our prosecutions fall by the wayside or fail in the criminal justice system because not of any fault of the prosecutor, but because the cases are poorly investigated. And in fact, we have data to demonstrate that the large majority of failed cases in the court system are through poor investigations, investigatory errors. And so we think the next lever that we would like to be able to pull is for that formal delegation of investigatory powers, so that we can follow up on specifically drug crimes, gangsterism, organized crime, and firearm violence, and investigate those cases properly, and make sure that they get then handed over to a prosecutor as a relatively sure thing, and then have a much greater chance of getting a guilty verdict. Fadila, thank you for those questions. Lots of good questions there. So yes, Cape Town does have sub-councils. So far as I know, we are the only city in the country that has sub-councils. And we do delegate certain powers and functions to those sub-councils. Those sub-councils are active. They have certain planning powers, certain property powers, and obviously accountability powers. And increasingly, I am experimenting with giving them some additional budget as well to do some local services, cleaning, parks and recreation, as you say, and some other things as well. So, for example, right now we are running a pilot in 3 of our sub-councils in the city, where we've given them their own budget allocation from city treasury, obviously, and said basically, you decide how to allocate that budget, you run certain cleaning and parks programs in your sub-council, and let's see what the outcomes are, and see if it's something that we can replicate across all 21 of them. There's nothing below our sub-council. You spoke about ward councils, but we have a ward councillor, that's one elected person. There's no structure at that level. The lowest level is the sub-council. Then, what's that? Oh, okay, yeah. So ward committees is like a community representation forum. They have no decision-making powers other than commenting, accountability, and the ward councillors get a very small budget allocation for their wards each year, and the ward committee decides how that is spent in the ward. But it's a relatively small allocation, to be honest. Then, why public transport and policing? Well, those are the things that, if I look at the functioning of the city, as I said, I really do believe if you look at major cities across the world, from Mumbai to to first world developed cities, middle income cities, you name it, public transport has to function for the city to succeed, and it has to function well. And in South Africa, it does not function well. It's incredibly dysfunctional. Up until very recently, we had no functional passenger rail system at all. And similarly, if you ask if you ask every South African, almost there is this incredible degree of public opinion unanimity on what the biggest issue in South Africa is, and it's crime. And so we have to be able to better address that as an issue. I don't for a second disagree with you that we also have very poor public outcomes in education. Education is a vast system, so just the Western Cape budget for public education is larger than my entire city budget. It has 70,000 employees versus the city of Cape Town's 34,000 employees. So it's nearly double the size. So, taking on the public schooling system is really quite an elephant. And I think I have a greater degree of confidence that the Western Cape government is doing a better job with public education than frankly the city would be able to do. So there's no need to argue for the devolution. I think we would do a better job in public transport and we'd do a better job in policing, which is why we argue for that. Okay, then taxes. This idea of profit. Firstly, I want to say, also you were talking about Cape Town being the most unequal. Actually, the opposite is the case. Cape Town is the least unequal of all of South Africa's major metros as measured by Gini coefficient. That does not mean, obviously all the Gini coefficients of South African metros are way too high. They're all above 0.6. Cape Town's is 0.61, Joburg's is 0.63, but of the 8, Cape Town is actually the least unequal. And there's a very simple reason for that. Cape Town has the lowest unemployment. As I said to you, the biggest driver of inequality in our society is unemployment, which I'll get to in a second. The gentleman, there was another question about unemployment there. All right, now this idea of turning a profit. Firstly, the city utilities do not make a profit. All of the surplus that they generate is used to cross-subsidize other services in the city. That is how it has been run for the longest time, for 30 years. And in fact, that is now over. The National Treasury, I'm not sure if you've heard of this utility reform program. I'll just describe it very, very briefly because we can have a long discussion about utility reform. But essentially, the National Treasury is driving this reform program that says each service must be funded by its own tariffs. So the services cannot be cross-subsidized from other services. You cannot take surpluses generated in the electricity account and apply them to the water service or to the trash collection service. So in Cape Town, we've by and large done that for a long time. Water sustains itself with its own tariffs and does not produce a surplus. The energy sustains itself with its own tariffs, but produces a huge surplus. That surplus was applied to cross-subsidize the trash collection service. And we have put that right in this year's budget by having a new standalone tariff for trash for citywide cleaning, which has been quite controversial. But in fact, all we have done is take the surplus that used to exist in the energy account and move it over to a separate standalone tariff. And that's why you've seen the concomitant reduction in per unit prices for electricity. So this has been a tough thing for the public to grasp, but increasingly the National Treasury is going to roll it out across South Africa to all cities and towns. And you will have these ring-fenced utility services, trash collection, water and sanitation, electricity, that must be funded by their own tariffs and must not cross-subsidize one another. So then all of your other costs that used to be subsidized by those services will have to come from your rates account. And the public is going to, is going to see that in the years ahead, and that will, I have no doubt, generate its own form of controversy. But I don't think that there's anything to query or to be concerned about from an ethics perspective of generating a surplus in one service and using it to cross-subsidize another service. So long as you are not building up enormous, totally unnecessary surpluses, and you're using that money to actually invest in public services, the public are still benefiting from it very directly. Then, I'm so thrilled to hear that Namibia has a Directorate of Decentralisation. Wow, what a great department. And I'm so pleased that you work for that department, and I think we need that in South Africa. a department specifically focused at decentralization. Yes, we do submit accountability reports to the central government all the time. I can't tell you exactly how often, but all the time. And we also account to our oversight committees, we account to Parliament, we account to the Auditor General. There's a lot of formal accountability. There is still a deficit of democratic accountability in South Africa, but that is rapidly changing, and that is very exciting. Then unemployment. This is the key thing. So the number one issue in South Africa is the fact that 36% of our country is unemployed. In Cape Town, that number is only 21%, but still, in most of the world, 21% would be considered crisis levels unemployment. So there's no way that we can be happy with having the lowest unemployment in South Africa. That is, to be clear, to emphasize this point again, that is what drives Cape Town having the lowest inequality, but it's still certainly nothing to be happy with or satisfied with. And that is why I say everything that we do in the city is focused on growing our economy faster. We have to get more people into work in our country. That is the only way that we will have a successful society in the future, in the decades ahead. So whether it be the work that we do to attract more tourists to Cape Town, in which we've had tremendous success. Tourism growth is 7% compound annual growth rate, tourism growth in Cape Town. And I'm not aware of many other parts of our national economy that are growing at 7% a year. I think that is a standout success story. Whether it be the work that we're doing to attract international call centers, whether it be all our infrastructure work that brings more businesses and investment, everything that we do is focused on growing the economy faster. One thing that we absolutely are clear about is that you cannot just employ more people in the public sector, because Cape Town has got 600,000 unemployed people, and we've got 33,000 people employed in the city of Cape Town. So, one of the most common pressures you will find, you will hear from voters, particularly voters in poorer communities, is the city must hire us. And the point I often try to convey is that if the city hires 1,000 or 2,000 more people, yes, it'll make a difference for those people. But we've got 600,000 people unemployed. The only way that we will do that is to grow the economy. To grow the economy much faster to absorb those unemployed people. That is why that is such a focus for us. And then finally, Mr. Njera, roughly, Jaap, you can correct me here if I'm wrong, but roughly 17% is allocated to the equitable share. Is that right? It's still 17? So roughly 17% of the national fiscus is allocated to the equitable share. And that has, of course, been under pressure, because when the equitable share was designed, the unsaid assumption is that your revenue pie is growing. So that number is going to continue to grow. But what happens when you have a nearly permanently stagnant economy, where in fact your revenue pie is not growing, and even in some years shrinking? Well, then you have serious pressure on public services. And that is the position we are in now in South Africa. You start to see provincial governments unable to pay the number of teachers that they employ. That's because that equitable share is under such crunch, because the economy is not growing, and so the state's revenue pie is not growing. In fact, it's shrinking. And yes, you are quite right to say most of those other funds are conditional grants, the biggest one of which is something called the Urban Settlements Development Grant, the USDG. That's the largest one, and it is a conditional grant. The other housing grants, most of these grants are actually for the delivery of public housing. So South Africa has a huge public housing program. It has already, since 1994, delivered 2 million fully subsidized free homes. And that is the largest other conditional grant that we receive on an annual basis, is essentially a housing grant and all of the associated services that come with those housing developments. So that's why we have to do a lot of rowing our own canoe when it comes to other infrastructure. and why we have to be creative about how we raise those funds. Such a pleasure to join you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mr. Mayor. This was a wonderful lecture and a wonderful engagement. There was no sweetheart questions and no easy rides, but you engaged us all with wisdom and passion. So thank you very much for that. We'll shortly release you. You have a city to run, but not before I want to hand over this token of our appreciation to you and thank you for your keynote.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks everyone, have a great time.
Thank you so much. So we are now going to go for a quick tea break. And before we do so, can we please assemble here in front for a quick group picture? That will be wonderful if we can do that right now at the start of our tea break. Thanks very much.